Hello and welcome to the video Spring Boot Test Restful Web Services with me Nam Amin from CodeJava.net. Through this video, I will guide you how to test Restful Web Services for a Spring Boot project with two types of tests: unit test that test only the controller layer, and integration test that test the integration between all layers in the application. And I will show you how to test CRUD operations, create, retrieve, update for RESTful web services. Through this video, we will be working with a Java project that is based on the following technologies: Spring Boot Web for the RESTful web services, Spring Data JPA for the data access layer with Hibernate framework, and Spring Boot test for unit and integration testing with the Unit 5 as a unit testing framework, and Mockito as a mocking framework. And I'm using the following software programs: Java Development Kit JDK, Spring Tools 3 IDE, SDS, MySQL Database Server, and MySQL Workbench. In a Spring Boot application, we often separate our code into some logical layers that look like this. The data access layer that works with database, and we have repositories and entity classes in the data access layer, and the service or business layer, we implement the logic for the application, and this layer depends on the data access layer to retrieve and update the database. And in the controller layer, we handle requests from the clients and send responses to the clients. And in the Spring Boot application, we can have two types of controllers: a web controller and RESTful web service controller. And in this video, we focused on the RESTful web service controller. This picture helps you understand how to perform unit tests for the RESTful web services, or in other words, we test the controller layer here. And because we focus on testing only the RESTful web services controller, so we need to use a Mockito framework to create mock objects for the dependencies of the RESTful web services controllers, such as the services objects. And we use mock MVC object provided by Spring Boot test to perform request and verify response to the RESTful web services. And we use object mapper provided by JSON library to convert objects to JSON to be sent along with the request, and convert JSON to objects when receiving response from the RESTful web service. So that's basically how to unit testing the RESTful web services in a Spring Boot application, as we focus on testing the controller layer. And in the second type of test, integration test, we will test the integration between all layers in the application: data access layer, service layer, controller layer. So we don't use any mocking framework to create mock objects. We just use a mock MVC object provided by Spring Boot test to perform requests and verify responses. And we also use the object mapper provided by the JSON library to convert Java objects to JSON and to be sent along with the request to the RESTful web service controller, and convert JSON response to Java objects. So that's the second type of test, integration test, for testing RESTful web services in a Spring Boot project. You see an existing Spring Boot project in Spring Tools 3 IDE SDS4, as you can see. And to test RESTful web services, the key dependencies we need, including Spring Boot Starter Web for exposing RESTful web services to the clients, Spring Boot Starter Data JPA to access the database with the Spring Data JPA and Hibernate framework, MySQL connector Java for connecting with MySQL database server, and we need to use Spring Boot starter test for unit testing and integration testing. The Restful web services, and Spring Boot we include the unit file as unit testing framework and Mockito as a mocking framework. As you can see in the jar files here, you can see section for JSON library, Spring Boot starter web here, and you can see JUnit Jupiter, JUnit 5 here for as a testing framework, unit testing framework. Mockito here for the mocking framework. And in this project, we are going to test this RESTful web services country REST controller here. This RESTful web services controller exposes CRUD operations to the clients. As you can see, this method lists or returns all the countries to the clients. A list of country objects, and this safe method allows the client to create new country or update an existing country. And the last method, delete, allows the client to delete the country by ID. So in the next few minutes, we are going to write unit test and integration test for this RESTful web service controller. And here are some notes when testing RESTful web service controller using unit testing or testing the controller layer. We test only the code in the controller class, or in other words, we test the controller in isolation. And we need to mock all the dependencies required by the controller, such as services and repositories. And we also mock the data for the dependencies, mock the data of the input and output of the API calls to the dependency in the controller. And for the code and details, we use this annotation web MVC test to run unit test, and mock bin to mock object for the controller, and we use mock MVC object to perform request and verify response object mapper to convert Java objects to JSON and by vector and some Mockito APIs. Now let's create our first test class for unit testing this RESTful web service controller. So I create a new Java class under the test source directory, and in this package create a new Java class, and the class name is country REST controller test. And to test only the controller, we need to use web MVC annotation, web MVC test annotation provided by Spring Boot test. And in this annotation, we specify the class of the controller we need to test. So Spring Boot, we load only that controller. Here we specify the country REST controller, not class. So when running this test class Spring Boot, we load only this controller. And we need to use an object of type mock MVC to perform request and verify response. Mock MVC, yeah, mock MVC. And in this REST controller, you can see it depends on country repository. So we need to use Mockito to mock objects for the dependencies of this controller, mock an object of this repository. So we use this annotation mock bin and private country repository country repo, and to use JSON API, we need to use this object provided by Spring Boot test section library object mapper here to convert Java objects to JSON format and convert JSON format to Java objects. Object mapper. Because in this project I'm using Spring security that depends on the user repository, so I also need to mock the bin for the user repository here. Bin private user repository user repo. And now let's write the first test method. Test public void test. We are going to test the receiver operation. The list or method here that returns a list of country objects. Test list countries. And because we are doing unit testing only the controller, so we need to mock the data returned by this method. You can see in the list or method it uses the country repository to invoke the file by order by name in ascending order method here. So we need to create mock data for this object in the test method. So we use Mockito here. When method, when the country repo file by order by name, I see here, and then we return, because in this method it returns a list of country objects, then return. So before that we create a new list of country objects here. List countries equal new array list. And then we return the list countries here. So that's how to mock the data input and output. Input, we don't have any objects because this method doesn't have any parameter, and output is a list of country objects. Now we add some country objects to this list, and this is an entity class country. As you can see, it has a very basic fields, ID and name. Just two fields. So we add new country, ID and name, one, India. There's some country here. ID 2 is Singapore. ID 3 is my country, Vietnam. ID 4 is United States. ID 5 is Japan. That's it for the mocking data. And now let's verify the making the making the request to the Restful web service method here, API here. So first we define the URL string. URL equal to the URL of the API here, / country, / list. And then we use the mock MVC object here to perform the request. Mock MVC perform. And since this method list all handles get mapping, get HTTP get, so we use the get method here, passing the URL. And then we expect the status of the response is HTTP is okay. As you can see in this here, we can check various HTTP status code here. Here we need to make sure that it's return HTTP okay, so we use the method is okay. That throws declaration. Now let's try to run this test method for testing the Restful web service, the retrieval operation for the first time. Open the outline view, outline, right click on the project, run as JUnit test. You see the test has passed successfully with a green indicator bar here, green check mark here. That means this URL, the Restful web service, actually returns the response with status HTTP okay. And furthermore, we want to verify the JSON response. So we need to get a response JSON. So we return here to return a MVC result object. MVC result. MVC result. And then we can get the JSON response string actual JSON response equal MVC result. Sorry, get response and get content as string. For testing purpose, we can print the content of the JSON response, actual JSON response. And then we can use the object mapper to convert this list of country objects to JSON and compare the two JSON strings. String expected JSON response equal object mapper. We use this method write value as string. An object is a list of countries, and it we convert this list of Java objects, country objects, into a JSON response, JSON string, and then we can compare. We use assert that method from assertJ library. That the actual JSON response is equal to, we use equal to ignoring white space expected JSON response. So this is the assert statement to verify the JSON response that actually matches the expected output, expected result here. Now let's run this test method again. Run. You see the test has passed successfully, and you can see in the console view it prints the JSON response here of the list of countries. Here you can see India, Singapore, Vietnam, United States here, and the message list or REST API is invoked is from the controller, Restful service controller here. So that's how to test the retrieval operation of a Restful web services. First, we need to create mock data for the repository in the controller here, and then we use a mock MVC to perform the GET request, and we expect the status of the response is okay. And then we request the JSON response, and then we compare the actual JSON response with the expected JSON response. Next, we are going to write another unit test method for testing the API for creating a new country here in the save method in the controller class here. So we write another test method, test create new country, and as you can see in the controller the save method here, it uses the same method of the repository, and this same method takes a country object here, and it returns a newly created country object, and this Restful web services method returns a string of the ID of the newly created country, so that we need to mock the input and output of the repository here, input here and output here. So here we create a new country object, new country equal new country, and for the new country we just specify the name, for example India, and another country object is a newly created country, saved country equal new country. For the saved country object, it has ID, for example the ID 1, name is India. Then we use the Mockito method when to mock data for the method call of the report dot save here, country report save new country, and then return the saved country object. That's it for the mocking data, and then we use mock MVC object to perform the request, and this time this API requires HTTP post mock MVC perform, and we use a post method to send post request to the controller, and we create the URL string URL here, which is the URL here of the Restful web service method here. Okay, and then we need to send the country object here as a JSON to the request. I will show you how. After the post method here, we set the content type for the request. Content type Content type for the request is application/JSON. Then the content of the request, the actual content is JSON string. So we need to use the object mapper here to convert this country object to JSON. Object mapper read value as string. Write value as string, and object is a new country object here, and it will convert this object to JSON string and send to the request. And for the assertion, we expect that the response is HTTP OK, and the server returns the ID of newly created country, which is the ID 1 here. So here we expect status is OK. And we also expect that the content from content result matcher here, and we use a string method that the content is a string match the value 1, which is ID here, ID of the saved country here. Now let's try to run this test method. Windows view outline, and run the test create new country method. So for unit testing the Restful Web Services controller, we test only the request and response of the Restful Web Services. We got an error here. Let's see what the error is. You can see expect status is true but was 403. 403 means HTTP forbidden error, because in this project I'm using Spring Security. So for sending post request, we need to also attach a CSRF token to the request. So here we need to update with CSRF from Spring Security. Here it will send a CSRF token along with the request from Spring Security here. So for the dependency of the project, you also need to have Spring Security test and dependency here to use a CSRF token. Here, that's it, and run the test method again. You see the test has passed successfully. Perfect, right? And in the console view, you can see on the server it prints ID nor name India. That is from the test method here, putting ID and name of the country object. So you see it successfully sent the Java object as JSON to the controller. And let's update the expect content here to string 2. Run again and it should failed. You see the test failed, and you can see response content expected 2 but was 1. Perfect, right? Next, I'm going to show you how to write unit tests to test the input validation of the Restful Web Services. For example, when When creating a new country, the name of the country must not be blank. So for the entity class, I use this annotation, not blank, provided by Java Bean Validation API to make sure that the value of the name field in the entity country is not be blank. And in the controller, in the Restful web service controller, in the save method, this API here, we use the valid annotation here to validate the country object here. And so the fields in this country object should be validated based on the annotations, JPA, Java Bean validation annotations here. And now let's write another test method. Test public void test country name must not be blank. And this time we create a new country object with empty name, and we test that the Webservices service should reject the request. And because the country name is empty, so the code to the repository here will not happen. So we don't have to mock the input and output. We just perform the request. We can copy this code here because it's similar. We don't need to write content yet. Sorry, we need to write this country object as JSON to be sent along with the request. And for this kind of test, we expect that the server returns HTTP BAT request here, so we check is BAT request. That's it. And because the repository method saved here didn't get called, we not get called, so we can use a Mockito method verify the method call of the country repository, country repo, and the times is 0 time for the save method, save country here. That's it. And now let's run this test method. Test country name must not be blank. You see, the test has passed successfully. That means the server actually returns the HTTP BAT request status code, and the country repo save method didn't get called because the country name is empty, and the server rejects the request with HTTP BAT request. We can also print the details of the request and response sent and received from the server during running a unit test method. So we can use this statement and do and print here, the print method here from the, you can see from the mock MVC result handlers here. It will print the details of request and response, so you can see in the console view. Now let's run this test method here again. Test country name must not be blank. And this time you can see the details of the request and response in the console here. Request here, post, request URI. You can see the parameter for the CASRF token for Spring Security here. Content type is application JSON. You can see here. And you can see for the response, the status is 400 here. 400 mean bad request here. You can see. Similarly, we can update the another test method. For example, the test create new country method here to print the details of the request and respond and do and print. And let's run this test method. Test create new country. Run as the unit test. And you can see the details of the request and respond here. The request here. And the response here. You can see the body of the response returns 1 here. But in the test, we expect that it is 2, so the test failed here. You see. Similarly, you can update the test list countries method here to print the detail of the request and response here. And do print. Let's run this test method, test list countries. And let's see the request and response details. You can see request URI here. And you can see the JSON in the response here, body here. You can see body is string JSON for the list of countries here. You can see. So when testing RESTful web services, you can use this statement and do and print to print the details of the request and response to the console, so you can see more information. Next, I will show you how to write another unit test method to test updating. Test the update API of the RESTful web services. As you can see in the REST controller here, the save method here can be used for both creating new country and updating an existing country object. So the test is very similar to this method, test create new country. So we can copy and modify, copy, paste and modify. And we change the method name to test update country. And for updating country, we need to specify the ID and the name of the country, and we change the name of this variable to exist country, ID1, name India, we change to Singapore, and the save country object Singapore as well. That's it, and we expect the return string is 1. That's it, very simple. Similar to create new country. You also set the content type for the request, set the content for the JSON. Okay, now let's run this test update country method. You see the test has passed successfully, and we can see the details of the request and response in the console. view here. You can see. Next, I will show you how to write unit test method for testing the delete operation of the Restful Web Service API in the controller. You can see the delete method here that handles the request HTTP GET request to delete country by ID here. Okay, so we write a new test method here. Test delete country. And we need to specify the ID of the country. Country ID equal 1. And in this delete method, it invokes the delete by ID method on the repository, and the repository of this method returns nothing, void. So when using Mockito, we can use a do nothing method. Mockito do nothing here when country report. The delete by ID method is invoked country ID. Because the delete by ID method returns void, it doesn't return any value, so we need to use do nothing and when from Mockito API. And the URL to the request is here, country delete, and then the ID of the country ID. And then we use a mock MVC object to perform the request. Perform REST request URL. And we expect that the server returns status OK. Status is OK. And we'll also verify that the method delete by ID has called once. So we use a Mockito verify here for the country report object. It has called once for the delete by ID method with the given parameter country ID. That's it for the test delete API of the Restful Web Service. Now let's run test delete country here. Run as the unit test. You see the test has passed successfully. Next, let's come to the second type of test integration for the Restful Web Services. We test the whole application to test the integration between layers. And specifically, we test the Restful Web Service APIs. And for the API, we need to use a Spring Boot test to test the whole application. And to use a mock MVC object, we need to use this annotation, auto configure mock MVC. And we use mock MVC for performing request and verifying response, and object mapper to serialize objects to JSON and vice versa. And for the integration test, we test the whole application, so we don't use Mockito anymore. Now let's write another test class for test integration. So I create a new test class here, country rest controller integration test, and for this kind of test we need to use the annotation Spring Boot test. So Spring Boot, we load the whole application so we can test the integration between all layers in the application. And we also need to use the auto configure mock MVC, auto configure mock MVC, so we can use the mock MVC object to perform a request and verify response. And we are auto while here to get an instance of mock MVC injected into this class mock MVC, and we also need to have an instance of object mapper injected into this class object mapper from section library object mapper here. And to verify the test from the database, we need to have an instance of the repository with country repository here, country report. And the content of the test method is similar to when we test controller layer here. Let me copy a simple test input validation. Test country name must not be blank here. We don't use Mockito anymore for this integration test. So we delete the code related to Mockito here. Okay, so we perform a post request to this URL. Content type is application JSON. We send the JSON to the request and use srf, and we expect that the server returns HTTP status bad request. Okay, now let's run this test method. Note that with integration test we don't use Mockito anymore because we test the real application, the whole application. Now run this test method, and we see Spring Boot test. We load the whole application, so the test will run slower with real database, as you can see here. The test has passed successfully here, and in the console view you can see Spring Boot load the whole application. You can see here Bootstrap Spring Data JPA, initialize JPA Entity Manager Factory, initializing test sublet here, and you can see the details of the request and response here. You can see the response status follow, meaning bad request, because we send an empty string to the country name. So that's basically how to perform a integration test. We need to use this Spring Boot test annotation, auto configure mock MVC. Now we are going to write a second test method that tests the CRUD API of the Restful web service controller here with integration test. So we can copy the code in the controller test here. It's very similar. Here, copy, paste, and modify. Except that we don't use Mockito anymore because we test the real application with the real database. So we create a new country object here. For example, United Kingdom of India, and we don't use Mockito, so delete the code, delete to Mockito, and new country here. Okay, new green. Okay, yeah, we need to assign and return the to MVC result object, and we can use the MVC result object to verify the response. MVC result here, MVC result. So we are going to test creating a new country with this name, and now we get the response from the server. Response equal MVC result get response get content at string. Yeah, and you know, in the same method here, it returns a string of the ID of the newly created country object. So I convert the response into a country ID object. Country ID equal new integer response. And to verify, to assert this test method, because it is going to proceed a new country object to the real database, so I need to use this country repository to get a country object from the return country ID. Find by ID, and sorry, that's find by ID and country ID here, and this return a country object, country saved country equal, and we assert that we return an option object, so we use a method get, and we assert that this saved country method has a name, that name is equal to country name here, country name is a string. That's it, how to test creating a new country for the Restful web service with integration testing the real database. After making the request, and then we get the response, and then we need to verify the test result by looking up that object from the database. And this is a MySQL database and workbench, and this is the database of the application. You can see the countries table here. And now let me load the data of the country. You can see no India, right? Now let's run this test method. Test create new country with integration test, and it will proceed a new country object to the database, and we will see a new row appended here to this countries table. You see the test has passed successfully, and let's check the database. Refresh, and you can see the newest row with ID 12, United Kingdom of India, got inserted here. Perfect, right? Because the country name is United Kingdom of India, we passed to the request here. Similarly, we can write another test method for testing the updating API of the Restful Web Service controller using the same method saved here. So we can copy this method, then paste and modify. Test update country. Country name United Kingdom of India. We want to change to just India, and you can see the ID is 12 here. So we need to specify the country ID 12. Integer country ID equal 12, and we pass the country ID and name to a country object here. So we update the database. We don't we just pass 12 here, and the Restful Web Service we return the country ID here. So the code to verify is the same. Verify the country name and updated to India. Okay, and before that it is United Kingdom of India in the database here. Now let's run this test method, test update country. You see the test has passed successfully. Now let's check the database. You refresh, and you can see the row with ID 12. The name has changed to India. Exactly in the test method here. Next, let's write a new test method to test the delete operation of the Restful Web Service API with integration test. Test public void test delete country. We delete country by its ID, so we declare an ID here. It is 12, which is the ID of the country India here in the database. And the URL we can copy in the test delete country method here. You can copy this code. Okay, so we perform a request to this URL country ID, and we expect that the server return status is okay. And we need to do an extra step to verify that the row with ID 12 doesn't exist in the database after this call yet. So we use a repo file, country repos, country repo file by ID, country ID. This return an optional object, optional country result, and then we assert that the result is not present. Assert that result is not present, meaning that there's no element in the optional object here. That's how to test delete. Now let's run this test method, test delete country. So you see with integration test, Spring need to load the whole application. So you can see the test running slower than testing only the controller. Okay, the test is green now. Now let's check the database with the ID 12 here. It should be removed from the database. Let's select again, and you can see the country India was removed from the database. Perfect, right? Finally, I will show you how to write a test method for test the retrieval operation of the RESTful web service API with Spring Boot integration test. So this test method is, we can copy the test all method here, test list countries here, copy paste and then modify. We don't use Mockito anymore, and we delete this, delete this, delete this. Yeah, we specify the URL for the RESTful Web Service API for listing all countries. We perform that request and we expect status is okay. And then we get the JSON response from the response here, JSON from the response here. And for this kind of integration test with a real database, we can assert that, convert the JSON to an array of object, countries here, array of countries, objects, object mapper, read value, string content and class type, JSON response, and value type is a country class. Because we convert to an array of country objects, so we need to use the array open bracket and closing bracket dot class here. So this statement, we convert the JSON response to an array of country object, and then we can assert the number of elements in this array. Assert that countries has size greater than, has size we can expect an exact number of elements here. We have 10 rows here, so we expect the size of array is 10. That's it. And now we can run this test method. Spring Boot, we load the whole application in this integration test, so you can see it is slow. You see the test has passed successfully. That means the server actually returns the JSON response that include 10 country objects, because we assert that the country's array size is 10 here. Perfect. Awesome, right? So far you have learned how to write unit tests for testing RESTful web service in a Spring Boot project. In a Spring Boot project that typically includes multiple layers here, and we test RESTful web services in the first way by testing the controller layer with unit testing, and then we use integration test to test RESTful web services with the whole application. I hope you will find this video helpful. Please subscribe to help me grow this channel. Like, comment, and share this video. Thank you.